I work a lot with insects and fungi and bacteria and, well, not very much viruses, but it's one of the things that I have to study. And I can tell you that insects definitely react to pain, or at least things that would cause them discomfort or pain. So they are also sentient beings that experience suffering, I would say, and want to live at least. Now, I wanted to actually ask about that double standard because it seems like it. I didn't really want to go on to crop deaths as arguments against veganism. I just wanted to understand how you would tackle that because in order to grow all those plants, all of them, I'm not talking about the bumblebees pollinating. I'm talking about every single plant that we need to eat to survive. It requires us to kill insects. And it's not even because we're not killing them because we want to get something from them. We are killing them because they pose a threat to our food security.
Hmm.
They and if you think, oh, well, it's just a few insects, they may take a portion of our stuff. It's not a portion. They are literally in South Africa. There is a what we call the false codling moth. Before we had a pesticide that could actually control that, they could ravage hectares of land, the entire plantation down in a matter
Hmm.
of weeks. So we're not talking about just a little bit of damage that we can share with the insects. They cause a problem for food security. So I wanted to know about that. Do you kind of see that as of just a just reason to kind of kill them because they are kind of coming into yeah, you get my question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to go
Anybody
first,
can
they
answer.
can. But I really want to go. But I always go first. So I'll let somebody go first if they want to go.
I would say that my contribution to this is short and is that I'm an antinatalist, and as an antinatalist, I don't even endorse the idea that humans should necessarily even be needing to
Mhm.
grow crops going forward. So as somebody who doesn't
Me.
advocate for an earth that is populated with
Mhm.
humans who need things like crops, I don't have
Well, that was a very quick and cut and dry
Okay.
answer.
that here.
Yeah. And Lucy, if you want to go.
No, logical consistency. Go ahead.
All
Thank
right.
you. So again, if we're talking about if veganism, right, is the rejection of animal exploitation, and also I would say a lot of vegans hold this stance. I'm not going to speak for them, but my position is I want to extend rights that we grant humans to other animals. Now, obviously, it may not look like pigs having the right to vote, but I want to extend similar protections under the law to other sentient animals. Now, when we look at crop deaths, right? So we can even, and Nick he goes by the Nutrivore, does a great job of this. If we look at something like insects or other animals eating our crops, if we put that in the human scenario, right? So imagine if there were millions of humans that were coming onto cropland and eating all of the food, and it's not their food to take, right? They're just coming on, eating all of the food, and they don't have enough intelligence or enough. They don't have the capacity to understand or to listen to, right? We can't get them to stop. I would say that even in that scenario with other humans, it would be like if we had to stop them with force, right? So when we have cropland and there are these beings, whether it animals, humans, whatever, who are just relentlessly eating all of our crops, right? Then yeah, I'm fine with protecting our crops and remove those animals by force if we have to. Now, I would like a system where we don't have to. I think pesticides, while they may do kill animals, I think a lot of times they or insects, they keep them off of the plants. And if there is a better system in place to where we don't have to kill those animals or remove them by force, that's what I would prefer. And again, when it comes to crop deaths, so the actual deaths entailed to create cropland, to grow crops in the first place, again, we're against animal exploitation. So I think a lot of those crop deaths would be reduced in a vegan world because we would actually be considerate before just plowing the fields. But even if some animals do die, the intention is not to exploit and kill those animals. The intention is to grow food for humans to survive, whether it's current humans, future humans, whatever the goal is. So that would be my position. I don't think it's a double standard. I think when we look at the definition of veganism, if the definition of veganism was I want all death or all animal death to stop, then I would say that's a contradiction or it's a double standard. But when we're talking about rejecting the exploitation and extending rights to other animals, I don't think animals dying in crop deaths or killing animals that are eating our crops or for food security, I don't think that's a double standard.
Well, in a way, I think that it might be because these insects and also these little animals, they're not there, we're not exploiting them or anything. And also we are taking away their rights in a way because they are simply there in nature eating to survive. They're not even bothering us. I'm not even talking about mosquitoes who can spread malaria, and they're not even spreading it intentionally. It's just because if they bite a person with malaria, they spread it to the other. But these insects, okay, they come along, they find food, they try to eat it. If you're saying that it's okay to kind of kill them because they pose a threat to our survival, well then I guess that's what you're saying. Then that's okay. It's not a matter of killing. It's a matter of exploiting. Is that
Yeah, and I'll ask you another. I'll put another scenario that may make more sense.
okay?
So let's say
Yeah.
we live in a civilized society, right? We have a society, we have laws, regulations in place. Let's say you have in my house, right? I'm in my house right now. Let's say wild humans who've never seen civilization, indigenous tribes, whatever, they come and they find this house, and they have spears, they have whatever, and they try and make shelter in my home, right? They don't know any better. They come in, start attacking me, start taking my stuff, whatever. Even though they are doing what's in their interest to survive, right? They may not know any better. They may not have the capacity to understand. I think to protect my rights and also to protect my property, I don't see a problem with using force to get rid of those people, right? Now, again, ideally, if I could, I would escort them out, or I would have another way of keeping them away. Like I'd have a fence, or maybe that's like pesticides, I'd have some way of keeping wild humans out away from my property. But just because like somebody doesn't have the capacity to understand, right? So like a dog may bite somebody or bite another animal to protect itself. That doesn't mean we should just allow those animals to do that, right? Because it causes harm. They may not know any better. But I would say that, again, when it comes to the rights that we grant humans, that's only possible in a society, right? And I don't think, I think it is perfectly reasonable and not contradictory to protect our food security and protect our crops against a bunch of humans, animals, insects, whatever, who are coming and taking our food security or trying to eat the crops.
So the reason I mentioned the double standard is because if that is posing a problem to our survival, it is the same thing as the animal testing that also poses a problem to some people's survival. Their medication,
But it's not just about survival. It's not. So forget about survival. If I had what's a good example? Like I mentioned with if it was something that it was just mine, right? So let's say I have a car, and an animal was running into my car and destroying it or wanted to destroy it, I would kill that animal. Most likely, if I had no other option, I would kill it or I'd find another way. It's not just about survival. It's when it comes to something harming me or taking my property or using my things, even if they don't know any better, right? Even if you had somebody severely mentally challenged who every time they go outside, they punch somebody in the face, right? Or they take something that isn't theirs. It's not a matter of life or death, or it's not a matter of survival, right? They could take your thing and you're still fine. It's the fact that they are taking your property. They're impeding on your rights, right? So when there's a being that's impeding on
Sorry, just a quick thing. Who
Sure.
has the right to those crops, though? Who has the rights to that land? Who has the rights to that?
Well, now you're
Don't the
talking
insects
about
also?
Yeah. Well, now we're talking about dismantling society, right? Now we're talking about that's kind of a bigger life question as to why are we here? Who says what is what? Like, when we're talking about having
Oh no, not at all in that sense. Mhm.
yeah, when we're talking about like
Yeah, not in that sense. What I meant was the crops that are there. Those insects. It is their food source. It is their only way. If we either kill them or we send them away. So I'm just thinking that's not. I understand the analogy between property when it comes to society. Here I'm talking about crops that only insects can only eat. So if they
What do
don't
you
eat
mean
that,
that
they will die.
insects?
If the only reason that they're kind
But we're growing the
the leaves
crops.
and
Yeah, but we are
well,
growing the
yeah, but I
crops.
mean
There's
they were
competition for
there first.
survival
They
there,
literally
right?
yeah. But the thing is that even though we're growing the crops, they were there. These insects were already in that land. They were underground. Some of the crops that we grow, we even grow from other plants that we just put in the tubers. Um, and that's why I said either we kill them or we remove them. So either way, they will have to go. So I don't. When it comes to property rights, I'm just saying that I don't. It's a problem because what are they supposed to do? We're going to have to force to remove them.
Okay, so let me give you, and I don't mean to take up too much time here, but let me give you another example.
That's okay.
Let's say, because again, we're talking about society, right? Because the reason why people have the right to grow crops on their land is because we grant those rights, right? Somebody has to buy the land. Somebody has right. We grant ownership to land, to things, to whatever. So let's say somebody wanted to. Let's say somebody purchased land to build a house, right? But on that land, before anyone ever got there, there are 10,000 severely mentally challenged people, okay, who don't understand rights, who don't understand property, who don't understand anything. And the person who purchased the land, whether it's to grow crops, whether it's to build homes, whatever it is, they could not remove, right? So if the options are, okay, there are 10,000 people or beings who don't understand anything about anything. The first option is going to be, okay, how can we relocate these beings or remove them without killing them, right? Force is the absolute last option we're going to use. So I would say, again, a lot of the crop devs or a lot of the technology we have, we can grow crops before actually having to kill these animals or poison them with pesticides. But just like in that human example, if the only way to remove those people or beings is to use force or is to use pesticides, whatever, then again, based on the rights we have as a society, I would still grant that, right? I wouldn't want to, like, again, I would want to see them not die, but what else? What's the alternative? Just let the 10,000 people that don't know any better that were already there just stay there? And then we, like, I don't really
But
think that's, I don't think that goes against veganism.
no, but well, that goes against a lot of morality that I would think. I mean, those people are still people. What gives you
Sure.
what reason to remove them in the first place? They
So
they,
if
they were there.
So if
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
bought a house, and you walked into the house and there were 500 severely mentally challenged people who didn't know any better, you wouldn't remove them?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You said that they came to your house. You had the house first.
No. You
Is that
bought
what
the
you?
house. You bought that. You didn't have the house first. You purchased the land.
Oh, okay. No. Well, the thing is that that's a different analogy because in the case for the crops and the insects were there first, not me.
No,
So
no.
those rights
I'm
that we were
saying no.
given.
I'm saying so you purchase a house, and when you show up to the house, there's already 500 people in there. But
Oh,
you
okay, yeah.
own the house, right? You own the house. The people are in there. They have no understanding. They have no way of understanding rights and property and whatever, right? What would you do, right? Are you
No, I
saying
would try.
that
I would
you
try
would
to
what?
remove them. To answer your question, I would try to remove them
Right,
because
exactly.
I was there first. But I'm not. I'm talking about the insects that were there or the
No,
wildlife that is
but
there
you're
for the
not. But
crops.
you're not there first in this scenario. What I'm saying is you're not there
Exactly.
first. No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no. I'm saying in both scenarios you're not there first. I'm saying in
Oh,
both
I wasn't there. So
scenarios.
they those. So in the case with the mentally disabled people, they were there first. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, but they're like consider them wild, right? Consider them quote unquote wild. They didn't buy the land. They don't have any way of understanding property rights, purchasing of land, anything. They're essentially incapable of living within our society, right?
So you
And you
would
should.
you would kill people that you find lesser, or that you cannot. If you needed to, you would kill them or remove them because
No. Not that I
you cannot
find
negotiate
lesser.
with them,
Again, when it comes to property rights
or that you
and my
cannot
rights.
negotiate with them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
If I
even though
had
they
to,
were
yeah.
there first, and you gave yourself those rights to be there
Well, yeah.
because they didn't give you the rights.
Correct. As a society, we do. So if you have people
so
who are
the society-
incapable of understanding, so if you have people who are incapable of understanding and posing a threat to you, or again in the form of crops, I don't see how it's a rights violation or a contradiction to manage those people.
I'm not entirely sure if Brandon realizes here that if this is practiced on humans, it would imply colonialism and genocide on people.
So I'll respond to that, but then I see that Lucie and Tofu want to say something.
I just wanted to say, like, to me, that's just competition for survival. Like, we all need
Right.
food at some point. You know, like, I agree with everything logical consistency said, but yeah, that's what it is. It's just competition for survival. If we can avoid, like, killing them, of course we want that, but...
However, the
survive.
medication also depends. Yeah, the medication also depends for some people to survive.
Yeah, but I wanted to address that real quick.
Yeah.
That is the difference between self-defense and using someone for your benefit and them
Okay.
being out of the scenario. There's a difference between someone attacking you or attacking like what you need to survive, meaning your food. So you need to like protect what you need to survive in that sense.
Yeah.
And someone just existing out there and you come and you take basically their health from them so that you can be healthy. There's a difference between the two.
But I'm sorry, you got me with the first part, but the second part, it's the same thing. I mean, they were there. The insects were there in the wildlife, and the little birds and the rabbits were there in the wildlife. We come there and we
No.
start growing our own thing for our own survival. So that's
They're
competition.
attacking our food though.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
It's not because they were eating there. Okay, we're taking also their means of survival. That's what I'm saying. They were
course.
there. If we remove
They're
them,
attacking
if we
our
remove
food.
them,
Even if it's like we decide it's our food, whatever, it's still we need to eat, so we need to survival, so we need to
yeah.
do that.
However, that means that they would need to go somewhere else to survive if we don't kill them.
Sure.
Correct.
Right. So forest removal, I think that the animals would still be against that. They would not want to be removed from where they were and everything. So it's a sacrifice that needs to be made, basically.
Well, it's not like a sacrifice, just like we need to compete to survive at some point, you know?
Well, it's a sacrifice for them. They don't want to move. And also, what if they move to a
Yeah.
place where they can't survive?
Of course.
So it is a sacrifice for them anyway. And it's on our expense because we're deciding what the sacrifice is. It's not like we asked them.
Well, it's
Sorry,
either
Sophie,
we
what is it?
sacrifice them or we don't survive.
Just like with the medication. That's what I'm saying. You see,
Well,
we
no.
sacrifice them to the
So
medication
with
already.
the medication and with all, I will take your word for it for now, but I would need to see research showing that.
I can
animal
read the
testing-
article to you right now.
No,
It's really right
you
there.
don't have to
It's-
read the article. I would like to look at the peer-reviewed research if you have
Oh,
any.
no problem. Sure. no
Yeah,
problem.
if you could send me the peer-reviewed research, because I am open to that. But again, I think what Lucie was saying is there's a difference between breeding and using animals to test new drugs versus creating a space for us to grow our crops. Right? We're not. It's not.
They both
so
depend on our
it's-
survival.
Well, no. Well, when you say they both depend on our survival, again, I have to see research.
It was more or less around this topic that began an off-screen debate between Brandon and I that lasted for nearly a day and a half. A quick Google search on the subject will provide anyone with a barrage of research papers and articles on the subject, a few of which I've sent to Brandon afterwards. As I mentioned in the previous part of this discussion, there are alternatives to animal testing, but they cannot, at this point in history, completely replace animal testing as they have critical limitations that prevent us from successfully completing experimentation for example, life-saving drugs. This is the scientific consensus and anyone can research it for free. In the previous parts, I briefly explained the difference between in vitro and in vivo, but for our purposes, the relevant difference is that in vivo entails animal testing, using their actual physical bodies as test subjects, and in vitro does not use their bodies for testing. So just for everyone to have the facts of the matter, especially the viewers, here's an excerpt from the conclusion of a scientific publication entitled In Vitro Test Systems and Their Limitations. Quote, "Unfortunately, we are still far from being able to stimulate complex situations such as microarchitecture and compartmentation of organs. It may be possible to fully replace animal experiments by in vitro systems in future. This will be the case when we, 1. Have understood all relevant mechanisms of toxicity, interactions between cell types and organs, including their compensatory mechanisms, and 2. Have established in vitro systems that correctly recapitulate all mechanisms. The time horizon for such ambitious goals will be rather centuries than decades. In the meantime, we should not neglect in vivo research. We will need more knowledge about normally functioning and chemically compromised organs and organisms to establish in vitro systems which are more than just in vitro artifacts. end quote, and also end of the entire paper. Now, it is important to note that animal testing is not perfect. There are indeed fundamental and methodological problems that render animal testing for certain purposes unreliable in providing accurate results. In the study entitled The Flaws and Human Harms of Animal Experimentation by Aisha Akhtar, the author points out a number of flaws and limitations that render animal testing unreliable. One limitation that I myself have speculated about for a long time is the number of differences between species in physiology and genetics. Although mice do share about 97.5% of their working DNA with humans, this does not account completely for the genetic differences between the two species, and certainly not for the physiological differences. What this paper succeeds to do is show flaws and problems with animal testing. What it fails to do is provide alternatives, and these alternatives are critical if we are to, quote-unquote, discontinue animal experimentation in whole or in part. As the study implies, alternatives to animal testing are being looked into. But until then, animal experimentation still remains the most accurate form of testing, despite its limitations and flaws. And important to keep in mind is that despite its limitations, animal testing has and continues to provide us with plenty of accurate results that have provided us with all the certified drugs that we use today. Regardless of any position that anyone holds, vegan or non-vegan, we must stick to reality and we must stick to the facts. And these are unfortunately the facts. What one does with these facts is up to them. Please bear all of this in mind as the conversation progresses.
We know that food is necessary for survival, right? I don't know about animal testing. We know that food is necessary.
No, for medication, some medication, like for example, penicillin. We all get our penicillin shots when we're young and everything. A lot of us would not have survived. And that's why I said, again, the only reason we're so many in numbers is because of these sort of testing that did happen in the past. So I'm saying that they do depend. We are here right now because of a lot of animal.
No. So, well, something that depended in the past doesn't justify us continuing to do it, right? So I'm not really concerned with what helped us in the past. We're talking about now going forward. So I'd have to see research. Yeah, I'd have to see research showing that we still need animal testing, and animal testing is still effective. But also, again, I was just reiterating Lucie's point. There's a difference between. Because I think an example of the animal testing would be if we used insects to grow our crops. Then that'd be a little bit more comparable, right? Because we use animals to test to test drugs on. If we were using these insects to grow crops, I would say, no, I'm against that. We should find a better system. We should find a system where we don't need to use animals for our survival. If we were using these insects to grow crops, I would say, no, I'm against that.
I must pause for a moment to mention that here, due to time constraints, I was not able to counter this very important point, as I wanted my other guests to join in on the conversation. But after the stream, I challenged everyone off camera on this, because of the harsh reality that we do indeed conduct experiments on insects and other pests such as rats and rabbits to develop pesticides that can combat them and prevent them from consuming our crops that we will need all the more for our survival if we are indeed to adopt a plant-based diet with the consumption of meat as no longer an option. So, faced with this new information, some positions change slightly, and in the future, we will perhaps have a more detailed discussion on this particular subject. Both Brendan and Lucie are of the position that the killing of pests that pose a threat to our food security is a necessary evil, though importantly, only under the condition that it is for our food security and there is no other way to protect our crops. They simultaneously believe that the experimentation on such insects and pests is not acceptable. Now, when confronted with the fact that the experimentation on these pests is indeed necessary in order to update pesticides to kill them, considering that pests develop resistance against these insecticides and pesticides, they clarified that only if this is the case, then under those circumstances, experimentation on these pests is acceptable. But do note that they specify that this should only be done as a last resort, and alternate methods of growing crops should be employed that do not necessitate the killing or experimentation of insects or small animals. TofuDog was the only one at the time to respond with a position that anticipated and accepted the reality that if we are to fully or even to a large extent reduce or eliminate the negative impact of humans on this planet and upon other species of sentient animals in this world, then the human population would ultimately need to be greatly reduced, if not eliminated. I say all this because I find it important to make my viewers aware of the changes in my guests' views that occurred after the stream.
Using these insects to grow crops, I would say, no, I'm against that. We should find a better system. We should find a system where we don't need to use animals for our survival. But us just surviving, if we're going to go down the route of, well,
Okay, yeah,
we have
I get
survived,
you.
then we should all commit suicide. That we should all just kill
Yeah.
ourselves and call it a day. So I'm not for I'm not for individual suicide, right? So I think that it's about creating the best system we possibly can with the least amount of rights violations, with the least amount of exploitation as possible, or if not none at all,
So when it comes
while
to, oh,
surviving.
sorry. Yeah, actually, I kind of get you guys now better, or Lucy and Brendan anyway. That it's more about like use and freedom and slavery when it's not necessary. Yeah, when it's not necessary, rather than us trying to compete as other animals, I suppose. And
It's like
everything.
an easy way, I guess, to also explain it is what is the difference between experimenting on non-consensual humans and
Uh-huh.
killing insects with pesticides for our crops? What
Right.
is the
What is
difference?
then what would the difference be between British settlers coming to indigenous land and chasing them away and then taking over their land, which has happened. So the thing is that we do these things. The only reality I'm trying to point here is that it's a sacrifice. There's no going around it. In order to be able to do this, some animals will have to suffer.
They didn't need
Think
to do
about it.
that to survive, though.
They didn't have to, but they did it anyway, and it was wrong, right? I don't know if you think that it was wrong, but
We're here to
many
cover
people
No,
would
but
say
they
that it was
literally
wrong.
didn't have to do that. They
They
just
don't literally
wanted to
have
do
to do
it, but
that.
they didn't have to. There was no like,
Oh yeah, for their survival, right?
correct. Well, not even, again, when we're talking about like the necessities when it comes to food, water, shelter, right? So again, veganism is not against humans getting food, water, shelter, right? Like I mentioned earlier, us being alive, the resources we have, and by the way, I'm against a lot of the practices we have in our common world. I think we do a lot in excess. I think we do a lot of unnecessary things, whether it's cosmetics, whether it's entertainment, whether it's, I mean, we have the Super Bowl, for Christ's sakes, in America, right? So when we're talking about things in excess and unnecessary, I'm against a lot of that stuff. But at the core, like Lucy kind of mentioned, there is a competition for survival. I don't know why, right? I didn't choose to be here, right? I don't have all the answers to the universe, why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing. But what I can tell you is the exploitation of animals is absolutely unnecessary. And if we get to a point where the relocation or the killing of animals is absolutely unnecessary, I would be against that as well. So I want to push it as far as we can, but the vegan ideology or the vegan philosophy, that is what's going to get us there.
Yeah, yeah. Tofu,
So
sorry, I know
again,
you've
not
been trying to.
veganism to try to avoid killing, but that would be another thing on top of it, like another thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get that. Sorry, Tofu, you wanted to. I'm sure you wanted to say something.
So I think that there is a comparison that we can draw again between the animal testing, which is that the animal testing that has occurred in like the systems for growing crops and the fact that so many crops are grown to feed to animals, which is probably a driving reason for why we probably also maybe use more pesticides and more sort of harmful to animals, methods that are more harmful to animals, is because people did not design these systems with animals in mind. But going forward, if we were to shift everybody's mindset, we're not even necessarily looking at systems that where we're growing food outdoors. And like Lucy said, we could rewild 75%. So we're looking at likely a 75% reduction in that kind of stuff. Anyway, so shifting towards veganism is already just slashing the number of animal sort of violations and harm that comes to them. And again, if we're not, we don't need to be too worried about insects at the moment, I would say, because if everybody collectively decides that we value insects, then certainly we could come up with methods of growing crops and growing food that seeks to minimize harm that comes to them as well.
Like veganic
Yeah.
agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wait, did you say organic or agriculture?
Veganic.
Veganic.
Oh, veganic. Okay, because organic is actually uses even more pesticides than okay. But no. Actually, I don't disagree with that. Though I think it's a distinction between because I know that I've heard vegans say this a lot, where they say if we weren't eating the cows and everything, we'll be reducing the amounts of suffering for animals. It's certain animals because other animals will have to kind of suffer as well. I know that there's more land. However, if we're growing crops, because that's our only food source besides, well, crops and not things that don't hurt other animals, as our food source, then the cows and pigs will not be harmed, but insects will continue to be harmed. That was just my point. But I do get that the mindset will probably start to change and also be concerned for insects if we take a step forward, if that's what you're saying, and I agree with that. Yeah. But it was an important question for me because again, I want these points to be as clear as possible, because even if it sounds horrific or it sounds like, oh, it's not good, I want them to at least be said so that and I'm glad that you did.